Hello, everyone, and thanks for coming back to this video excursus about money. And in the first episode, I said that money is meaningless unless we have faith in it. And so that's why I thought we should segue into a discussion of inflation and some of the consequences of inflation. Now, before I get into that, though, I want to talk about inflation in the broad sense before figuring out how it affects us. So I would argue that there are actually two kinds of inflation. The first is something we're all familiar with, particularly these days, which is the gradual rise in prices in an everyday way. Now, that can get to a point where we notice it, as we have, say, in the last couple of years, where things that were, say, $1 are now $1.10, $1.15, etc. And so we definitely are aware of it, and we grumble about it, and we wish prices wouldn't go up. But, and this is essential, it's not as if we're about to give up on the dollar overall. In other words, we might want more money, we might want lower prices, but we still more or less assume that things are going to continue moving forward. The second kind of inflation is so-called hyperinflation. And that's when the currency loses virtually all value. Now, the most famous example of this is Germany in the Weimar period in the 1920s, but it's not the only example. Relatively recent examples include Zimbabwe, and it looks like Argentina might be heading in that direction too. The idea being that in hyperinflation, you lose any sense that the currency has any value, or in semiotic terms, the sign of money, that it is a thing of value, gives way to being a signifier, that is to say, recognized merely as a representation. And so, as a result, we lose faith in it as anything valid as a means of exchange. And when it goes on too long, too far, it ends up reverting to barter. That's to say, a one-to-one transaction in which you buy something from me and I give you something back in return. Now, barter does have one positive characteristic in that it restores utility as a measure of value. But it's obviously very cumbersome as a means of large-scale exchange, and it has an awkward consequence, which is to discourage innovation. Why should that be? Well, think about it for a second. We have a transaction, and I promise to pay you with whatever this newfangled thing is. Well, that newfangled thing has no known utility, because it's new. It's an innovation. It may indeed have great potential in utility, but you don't know what it is. So why should you want to exchange anything for it? It's a huge risk. Now, the neoliberal economy is not exactly inflationary, but it attenuates this process of the devaluation of value even more, because it's no longer a question of money being a reward for hard work as so much as complex bookkeeping and electronic phosphors. And the wealth that is generated from this highly arcane process is often invested in things or activities of questionable value. In other words, the representational purpose of money has been reified into a concrete thing to be pursued for itself. That's to say, money becomes a goal in and of itself. The irony of which is that in purely material terms, money has never been cheaper or easier to acquire. And just as the ancient miser had piles of gold to point to as proof of his wealth, today's super rich have spreadsheets filled with all these numbers that show just how much they are worth. The self-aggrandizement and short-term gain expressed in this kind of manipulation is a very poor substitute for the trust that made capitalism possible in the first place. And I'll close on that note to look forward to the next episode, where I'm going to talk about digital technologies in relation to all of this and what that has done to all of our expectations about how money functions and what it can do. So, on that note, I hope to see you in the next one, and please leave a comment. I'd love to hear from people. So anyway, talk to you later.